Dundas Games, haha! Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gendo Okeshi here with a League of Legends guide just for you. Today we shall be discussing the topic of jungling. Some of you who are new may be asking, what is a jungler? And indeed, what is the jungle? Well, the jungle, if you take a look at the map, is the area in between the lanes, inhabited by neutral monsters. Ignore the fact that this is more a forest than a jungle, colloquialisms dictate otherwise. The role of the jungler is many-faceted, but their primary, most basic purpose is to take advantage of these neutral monsters, killing them for gold and XP. This allows your team to fully benefit from all gold and experience sources on the map, putting one more lane ahead in levels. That is to say, if there is a jungler, then you allow your team one more lane with only one champion in it. Since experience points are normally shared, that one player will level up faster than if there were two. In addition to basic jungling, the jungler is also generally responsible for controlling objectives, ganking, and a large chunk of warding around the map. First, however, let's look at the jungle itself. Each side's jungle consists of 6 camps: blue buff, the white, wolves, wraiths, red buff, and golems. The blue buff camp contains the ancient golem, who holds the buff, and 2 young lizards who toss tiny little fireballs at you. They're pretty pitiful, but actually quite important, and we'll talk about why later. The blue buff itself grants mana and energy regeneration, as well as cooldown reduction. At level 1, the golem and one of his lizard allies will give you enough XP to reach level 2. The golem hits quite hard though, and can kill you if you're not careful. The white is the only standalone camp. It hits like a truck and has almost as much health as the ancient golem, but if you can best it, you'll get a huge chunk of golden XP as well as some health and mana returned to you. The wolves are the fastest moving and attacking camp. They hit hard for a small camp, but if you were able to clear a buff camp, they shouldn't pose a real threat to you. The giant wolf grants you a small percentage of your missing health and mana when you kill it, just like the white. The wraith camp is generally considered the weakest. That's why there's 4 of them. 1 big one, and 3 small ones. Like the wolves, the big one will grant you some health and mana when you kill it. Interestingly, the large wraith has as much armor as the white. Try to focus it down first, as it deals the vast majority of the camp's damage. This is especially true with junglers who have some form of area of effect damage. Dr. Mundo's Burning Agony, for example, can just about kill all of the small ones while he's busy attacking the big one. The red buff camp contains the lizard elder, who holds the buff, and 2 young lizards, exactly like the blue buff camp. The red buff makes your basic attacks stronger, dealing additional damage over time, and slowing the target for a few seconds. Just like the blue buff, clearing the camp first will let you reach level 2. Finally, the golems are arguably the strongest non-buff camp. Why? Well, they hit really hard, they have a lot of health, and, unlike the white, there are 2 of them. If you can best them though, the reward is well worth it, as they give quite a lot of XP and gold for your trouble. Fortunately, the larger one gives a health and mana bonus, just like the giant wolf and wraith and white, and if you're a mage, you will have an advantage against them, as they are especially weak to magic, sporting negative magic resistance. Both the buff camps will spawn at 1 minute and 55 seconds. All other camps will spawn at 2 minutes and 5 seconds. When killed, each of the non-buff or small camps will respawn 50 seconds after the last monster in the camp has died. The buff camps, on the other hand, will respawn 5 minutes afterwards. Your first clearing of the jungle is your most important. It sets the general tone of the game and ensures the stability of future clears. Once you're through the first time, everything should be smooth sailing as far as clearing the jungle again. When you start, you have to decide which side of the jungle you want to begin on, or, more accurately, which buff do you want to get first. The blue buff, with its cooldown reduction and bonus mana, will help you clear the jungle much faster, and allow you more time afterwards with the red buff. Some champions, who use a lot of mana at early levels, such as Amumu and Fiddlesticks, pretty much have to start at the blue buff, or else their clearing will be extremely slow. Starting with red buff allows for earlier ganking. The slow makes it a lot easier for you to land kills, and in some cases, if you're using an auto-attack based champion, it will help you clear the jungle faster. This is especially true of champions who do not use mana, such as Tryndamere or Shyvana or Lee Sin. When clearing, you also need to decide just how aggressive you wish to be. In a moment, I will describe your basic clear of the jungle, but remember there are other options. Some aggressive junglers will clear the 2 buffs plus 1 other camp to reach level 3 and immediately go gank. Some may even gank at level 2 after having only taken the red buff. These methods tend to require considerably more coordination with your team, so keep them in mind as you get more practice in as a jungler. They also require that your teammates provide what is called a leash. Leash, in this context, comes from when monsters used to chase the first target that hit it rather than whoever is closest. Nowadays, that simply means that your allies should help you out in taking down your first buff camp, just as long as they leave before they accidentally take your experience or the buff. It's very important they do this, especially at higher levels of play. If they lose 1 or 2 minion kills, so what? It's much more important that the jungler starts off strongly so they can provide more help later. If you're new to this, however, your allies probably are too. Can't always rely on them knowing what to do, so I will show you the 2 basic jungle clears that you can do without help. You should practice this alone in a custom game before trying it the first time against real players. It'll help you gain an understanding of just how much punishment your character can take at the start. Either method will get you to level 4 by clearing each jungle camp once. Beginning at the blue buff is most common. Remember to use Smite to save yourself a lot of trouble. From there, it's pretty much a straight line. Clear the white, wolves, and the wraiths. Use your Smite every chance you can, especially once you get to the red buff. And then, clear the golems. It's important to note that with most camps, you should kill the biggest monster first, as they deal the vast majority of the damage to you. The golems are the only exception to this. The small golem deals about half as much damage, but dies to just a few hits. Even if it's half what the big one does, it still deals almost as much damage as the big minions in other camps. Therefore, killing the small golem first is worthwhile so as to take significantly less damage from the camp as a whole. There are some minor complications to this. Firstly, I said take the lizard and then the golems. This should be the case primarily if you're concerned with the enemy trying to take your red from you, or if you're then going to go to bottom lane and gank. If you don't think they will, take the golems and then the lizard elder, giving you more time with the red not spent clearing camps. Secondly, some junglers prefer to skip the white camp. This is often personal preference, but it really depends on whether or not the champion you use deals mostly single target damage or area damage. If they do most of their damage to one target, like Shyvana, clearing the white is a piece of cake. If you're mostly doing area damage, like a Mumu, most of your potential damage is wasted, and you could just as easily be clearing those other camps much faster. If you choose to skip the white, you will need to come back and clear a different camp a second time. Usually, junglers will clear the wraiths as they spawn right as or just after they reach them a second time. If you're heading towards the lane the wolves are closer to, you might clear them instead. Either will get you to level 4. Starting from red buff isn't quite as straight a line, but still easy. Clear the red buff and make a beeline for the golems. If you can, hop over the wall to get to them. There will be a little bit of backtracking, but then it's time to kill the wraiths, wolves, the white, and finally the blue buff. Pretty simple, right? Once you hit level 4, you'll be ready to gank some lanes or head back to your base for more items if you find yourself low on health but high on gold. As with the other route, you might wish to skip the white, in which case you may have to backtrack all the way to the wraiths for a camp to kill, or the wolves if you were slow on the buff. Simple as those instructions may be, jungling is certainly not easy, and you must properly equip yourself, both outside and inside the game, to be effective. Outside the game, you have runes and masteries. While there are many ways to optimize specific junglers, they all share a few things in common. In runes, that consists of flat armor seals. These are extremely useful as monsters only have basic attacks. They'll save you lots of health. Even if you aren't able to purchase tier 3 runes yet, this is the one instance I'd recommend purchasing the tier 1 equivalent. Masteries can help you out here as well, specifically the defense tree. These aren't necessary on every single jungler, but they are definitely useful, especially when you're first starting out. Tough Skin reduces damage you take from monsters, as does Hardiness by giving you more armor. Bladed Armor deals damage to monsters every time they hit you, helping you clear the jungle faster. In the offense tree, there is also Butcher, which will make you deal extra damage versus monsters. Within the game, there are a variety of items that can help you out. Primarily, when starting the game, you will most likely begin with a Hunter's Machete and 5 health potions. Hunter's Machete is very powerful in the jungle, but does nothing to minions or champions, so don't let me catch you ever starting with this anywhere else. Some champions can start with other items, such as cloth armor, Doran's blade, Doran's ring, and so on, but this is your basic setup. Don't forget to use those potions too while you run through the jungle. They are very, very important for keeping you alive. Hunter's Machete can become a variety of useful items that help you out both in the jungle and out of it. Madred's Razors let you deal significantly more damage to monsters with each auto attack and hit faster. Its next step, Wriggle's Lantern, does even more damage, gives you a free ward to place every few minutes, and gives a massive amount of extra gold every time you kill a monster. Once you've killed enough monsters, it becomes the Feral Flare, allowing you to start applying all that extra damage to enemy champions as well. This line of items is very powerful on auto attack based champions like Master Yi. Hunter's Machete can also become Spirit Stone, and its greater forms, Spirit of the Ancient Golem, Spirit of the Elder Lizard, and Spirit of the Spectral Wraith. These are awesome for tanky, damaging, and caster-based junglers respectively, granting awesome extra damage in the jungle and unique bonuses otherwise, such as health, cooldown reduction, tenacity, bleeding damage, and bonus ability power. They all also sport the Conservation passive, giving bonus gold whenever you kill big monsters. They are all extremely efficient and powerful, and you should consider purchasing them. Finally, to help you in the jungle, there is the summoner spell Smite. Always take Smite. Even if you think you can jungle without it, that's not the point. Not only does it make it easier for you to clear the jungle with more health, it counts as a spell for the purposes of Spell Vamp, which is innate on some champions like Lee Sin, it's on a really short cooldown, and, most importantly, it lets you secure and steal objectives. It does 1000 damage when you're level 18. This is really quite powerful for getting your team Dragon and Baron, as well as stealing buffs or securing them for yourself. Go ahead and not take it if you dare. Just don't cry to me when your other jungler comes and steals all your stuff. Speaking of stealing stuff, let's talk about counter jungling. That is, stealing the enemy jungler's camps. You can, of course, go to the other side of the map and steal whole camps from them, but that isn't necessarily optimal. It's often far better to steal only part of the camp. For example, you might go and kill the large wraith, but not any of the smaller wraiths. The large wraith has most of the gold and XP, so the enemy is left with only the tiny amount the small ones give. The large one won't respawn until the whole camp has died, and only then does the respawn timer start ticking. This is where the small lizards I mentioned earlier come into play. The buff camps take 5 minutes to respawn. If you steal the buff and leave the lizards, the enemy is denied from getting it for much longer. On the other hand, if you want to steal the whole camp, do so. You can then keep track of when it will spawn next to steal it again. If you're only taking part of a camp though, think about what effect it will have on the enemy. How much time will they have to spend clearing the camp of small monsters? If it's a Mumu, for example, he can clear full camps all at once with his AoE abilities, so leaving more than one monster alive would just give him more stuff. If it's someone like Jin Zhao though, who has mostly just an auto attack for damage, it will be more of their time and energy wasted clearing the camp for basically no reward. You can also use this opportunity to ward the enemy jungle. This will help your team keep track of them, but it also gives you the chance to steal from them even more or even get a kill on them. Say for example, you ward the enemy red buff. If you then spot them taking it, you can run in to smite steal it and kill them for it. Free stuff. As the jungler, you should try and carry a few wards with you as often as possible. The jungler wanders around the map more than any other role, so you have a great opportunity to ward where your allies can't get to for whatever reason. While you're wandering, you can also gank lanes. The jungler should try and help any lane he can, be it one that is in trouble and behind, or one that is ahead and he wants to get more ahead. Ganking is arguably the easiest for a jungler. It's very difficult to know a jungler's whereabouts at all time, but a laner who tries to gank can more easily be called as missing or spotted on the way. Ganking is a topic that deserves its own video, but for now remember that you should always try to get between your enemy and their escape route. If your ally has pushed to the tower, it's probably not a good time to gank. Also, when ganking, be sure to make your allies aware of it by pinging the target. If they don't see you coming and you jump in, your gank will likely fail. If your gank is successful, you can then lead your allies to take other objectives, like turrets and the dragon. Finally, let me talk about buffs. After the first clear, the jungler is much less reliant on buffs. They should generally keep the red for themselves during the laning phase, as it's most useful in a ganking situation, but later it will be more powerful on your team's marksman. The blue buff, on the other hand, can and very often should be donated. Usually this goes to the AP caster in the middle lane, as they often expend a lot of mana when trying to cast their spells, but consider who on your team can use it best. If you've got Katarina in the middle lane, for example, she doesn't have any mana, so it's much less useful for her. If you are counter jungling, well, you can even donate the enemy's buff. Just make sure your allies are aware when you try to do this by pinging and telling them in chat. And try to have the buff monster low on health already when your allies come to get it. The less time they have to spend out of lane, the better. All this combines to make the jungler a very important member of the team, a leader in action throughout the game by controlling buffs and providing ganks. It's a lot to stay on top of, and your allies will expect a lot from you. But if you can handle the pressure, then jungling is very rewarding and very fun. If this sounds like your cup of tea, I can recommend a few junglers to start with that are cheap to get and easy to pick up. Both Warwick and Fiddlesticks have beyond amazing sustain in the jungle, making it very unlikely that you can die while clearing it. They both also have amazing ganks past level 6 to help your allies with. Nunu's sustain is similarly powerful, and he can be quite a lot of fun to bully enemy junglers with and steal all their stuff. Master Yi, while a little more difficult as he doesn't have the same level of sustain, clears like a monster and does massive damage, scaling really well into the late game. So, thanks for watching everyone. If you enjoyed this guide, please let me know by hitting the like button. Speak up in the comments below if you have advice or questions. We're all here to learn. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for guides, gameplay, and other silliness. Follow me on Twitch for streams and Twitter and Facebook to see what else is going on. Till next time, I've been Gin, and you've been watching me talk about a video game.